Thank you very much, George, and huge thanks to GEF for asking me today. It's a very interesting feeling being the least intelligent person in this virtual room. I feel a bit like I've found myself, fat as I am, with no extra training on the starting block of the 100 meters Olympic financial final, as it were. But I'm still very glad to be here, and I hope that I can represent not only the campaign that we're working on, but also, to some extent, the voice of the ordinary woman and man trying to do the right thing. Let me give you a bit of context. My journey to here began in 1985, when I went to Ethiopia in the wake of the famine there and after the Live Aid concerts. And I saw people suffering in a way that no human should ever suffer. And since then, I have been obsessed, as it were, by the simultaneity of human suffering. As we sit here today, there's a mother choosing right now whether or not to spend her money on food for all her children or on life-saving medicine for one sick child. And there's a family deciding that because of the circumstances forced on them by climate change, they must abandon everything tomorrow and begin the life of refugees. That's really still why I'm here. And I think it is a good reminder that this is what meetings like this are actually still about, to do our personal best to try and change actual human lives and save our planet. As a result of that experience, in 1986, we set up Comic Relief and Red Nose Day, a fundraising proposition, very much of its time. And so far we've raised, I think, £1.3 billion, which we spent at home and abroad. And in terms of business, as it were, that's what I would call my CSR phase, doing a bit of specific good. My next step was getting involved in the politics of things after a conversation with Bob Geldof, where he pointed out to me that he'd made more money in a 30-minute tea break with President Mitterrand than in the whole of Live Aid and Band Aid, because the president just sort of nudged up their foreign aid by a percentage point of a percentage point. And that led me to getting involved in the founding of Make Poverty History, that campaign and the Live Aid concerts that went with it, trying to double aid and cancel debt in the poorest of countries. So that was the journey from fundraising to political agitation and the big money of that. All of that, it turned out, was in fact a fight for the MDGs. And the next thing I became obsessed with was the SDGs. I so wanted them to be even more successful and better than the MDGs. And I do know about bad sequels. Anyone who's seen Bridget Jones's Diary 2 or Mr. Bean's Holiday will know quite how guilty I've been of that. So we worked to help them make the SDGs famous and popular, worked on the branding, on giving them short names, on making films to explain them, teach the SDGs in schools, put them on TV. And we're not doing badly there, I think, especially in the way that they've become so important and relevant to business, which is a huge and unexpected result. And I'm still fighting for that. But why I'm here today is part 4 of my journey, because the real flavor of the times for the person in the street, I think now, is the question of what can I actually do in my own life to help a world on fire? You see it everywhere. Suddenly people, especially our marvelous activist younger generation, are asking that question, and they're finding lots of gripping answers, changing the food they eat, the way they travel, the clothes they wear. And I think the next big public revelation is the power of everyone's own money. I think we've seen a real generational shift from talk to action. How well I remember my generation talking in endless pubs about how they were going to change the world and then just ordering another pint and listening to Peter Gabriel. But this generation taking to the streets in numbers unlike ever before, the climate strikes, the Women's March, the Black Lives Matter movement, and then in their own lives, they're doing something about it. And the new thing that I've become so interested in over the last 18 months is this question of money. The key moment for me in this journey was the story of Bronwyn King. I don't know if you know it, she's an Australian cancer doctor who I think at the age of, let's say, 34, had her first meeting with her accountant and said pensions came up, and she said, "Where's my pension?" And he pointed out to her that I think 3 of the top 5 things that she was invested in were tobacco companies. So she suddenly realized that she'd probably killed more people with her investments than she'd saved with all her life's work. So myself and a large group of people started looking into this, where our money is invested, and in banks, in investments, and especially pensions, and saw that it's hugely powerful. The UK pensions are worth about 3 trillion on their own, which is money of a dimension that, if invested in things that are going to change the world for the better, would make a huge difference. I mean, more than 10,000 red nose days. So let me just show you a little film about how people react when they get faced with this huge fact that their pensions are invested. Most people don't even realize that, and that they have the power to do good.
It never occurred to me before that my pension could be something that would create change.
It doesn't sound like it can or should work.
I think most people don't know what their pension's investing in.
What? Invest in these?
Making weapons and ammunition, it's a no-go.
Cigarette companies, gambling, no way.
Well, there you go. If my pension went to these things, that would be a wonderful, wonderful thing.
Social housing, infrastructure like schools and hospitals,
Building wind farms, tackling climate change.
Companies that treat their workers well. This is my kind of list.
Yeah, I'm going to go make some calls when I leave here.
Now I'm going to run back home and check.
Understanding that the money could be working to contribute to a better world. That's pretty amazing.
So we've launched this campaign called Make My Money Matter. We're trying to grab headlines to say to people, don't support things which contradict your lifestyle. Don't campaign for peace and fund arms manufacturers. Don't stop your kids smoking and then support cigarette manufacturers. Don't make 100 choices in your own life to support a better environment and then fund fossil fuels. It's time to make our money matter. Time for pensions with intention, time to be pension positive, time to be proud of our pensions and what they're achieving in creating a world we want to retire into and we want our children to grow up into. I think this is going to be the next big revelation to the public. And I think the demand from the public is going to become huge for ethical, sustainable pensions and banks and investments. And it is really already brewing. We're almost there. A piece of research from DFID has already found that when asked the question, 70% of the British public want their investments to be ethical and sustainable. And now we're trying to get people to act on that. And we're asking everyone here today to facilitate that passionate action. People are going to realize what a piece of Finnish research says, that changing where your money is invested is in fact 27 times more effective in reducing your carbon footprint, for instance, than going vegan, taking fewer flights and using less water, all put together. And this idea really works. We did a podcast called The Guilty Feminist the other day, and I'm going to read to you from an email that we received this morning from a random listener. In the time it took me to listen to the podcast, I was able to move 100% of my pension fund, including all future contributions, into a socially responsible investment pool. My job for this week is to convince my partner to do the same. I was delighted to see how easy it could be. Thanks for explaining why this is so important. So this is the direction of travel. It's not going to go backwards. And what I'm here today to do is ask all of you to jump on board if you haven't already. And if you have, head for the driver's car and speed up the train. There are also really brilliant and workable and important examples. I'm sure you'll be hearing many of them of how this works at scale. In the UK, our largest pension fund, Nest, have made a commitment to go net zero emissions in their default fund by 2050, with the ambition to halve them by 2030, moving climate commitments into the mainstream and taking the kind of bold action we need to meet our Paris climate commitments. This is a really important commitment, and our big question is, if Nest, why not the rest? In Australia, you have the likes of My Future Super launching as an ethical-only pension fund, combining high levels of uptake, engagement, and returns. In France, the Solidarity Fund has increased money going through pension funds into social enterprises by 10 billion euros since it started. And from an institutional perspective, the Church of England have just put 20% of their pension fund, I think that's £600 million, into climate change investments. So it is coming at us all, and it will grow. When I first spoke to Mark Carney about this, he raised all the issues that have held things back. The lack of public knowledge, the nervousness about whether returns would be as good, the lack of consistent evaluation frameworks, the many legislative complications. But he said, do the campaign anyway, because if each side waits for the other to sort everything out, we will never get there. And of course, he was right. Lots of evaluation systems are pressing through. Ethical pensions are now often making more money than their less ethical equivalents, and the government are working faster than ever on changing legislation, and we are trying to push them to move even faster. This is the right time, with everyone asking that question, what can I actually do? So what we're going to do is we want to harness this opportunity and catalyze this energy of people to change their lives, to build a movement that makes sure that every member of the public can make their money matter. And it's a unique window, presenting through the UK's presidencies of COP26 and the now 2021 G7. And we're going to do three main things in our campaign over the coming year. We're creating this public-facing campaign to tell a story that's never quite been told at large. We are building a partnership of really high-profile individuals and organizations who will make the first move in their sector. We're convening NGOs like the World Wildlife Fund, movements like Share Action, communicators like TED, banks like Triodos, businesses, universities, local authorities, and public figures, and helping them all work with their pension funds to make direct change. And then we're also advocating for industry reform and policy change with a Make My Money Matter manifesto. We know change needs to happen at multiple points across the system. So we're trying to create a unifying call for high priority, high impact reforms that can transform the system from within. So that's our job. And I suppose my real message to you is the public are coming. They're going to understand, they're going to be demanding, they'll realize this is not only about disinvestment and, as it were, you know, helping a few cocoa farmers in Kenya. It's about the fight for climate, it's about renewable energy at home, it's about affordable housing and healthcare at home. And it really is one of the key ways how we find the funding for things that will change the world and fund the global goals, creating new businesses, new jobs, new money, and the just and fair world that we're all looking for. And this change really is, I think, happening in a very profound way. There is a consumer revolution happening, so that businesses with moral purpose that you invest in will succeed more because the public will demand that purpose in the things that they buy. And also, they will have the best people in the world working for them, because business people want to work for exactly those same companies too. So if I may return to me being the least intelligent person in the room, I'm also one of the least powerful. And it really is an amazing time for all of you to flex the muscles that you've been working on for a lifetime in finance in order to deliver the SDGs, to make us the first generation to end extreme poverty, the most determined generation to fight inequality and injustice, and the last generation to battle climate change. The new Gandhis and Mandelas are going to be business leaders, investment leaders, finance leaders who make bold and urgent steps and who move the money that's actually needed to fund the changes the world needs. You are the necessary heroes of this generation. No capes, no funny helmets, but the ones with the power to deliver the change that we need. The greatest surprise and joy of the last 10 years for me has been the way that business has leapt to the forefront of change. At a recent meeting with the Secretary General of the UN, he said that business has been moving much faster and with more determination than most politicians. So today, we're asking all of you for partnership and urgency and imagination and bravery. The Doors once said, the time for hesitation is through. And it is time to move radically from talk to action, even in the context of the tragedy of COVID. After the tragedy of World War II, the UK's biggest action was the foundation of the NHS. And I really believe that this pandemic could be a portal through which we all walk with higher ambitions than ever. Shakespeare, as usual, put it better than the Doors. He said, there's a tide in the affairs of men, which taken at the flood leads on to fortune. Omitted, all the voyage of their life is bound in shallows and in miseries. And on such a full sea are we now afloat, and we must take the current when it serves or lose our ventures. I do beg that you all leave here asking the same question that every passionate person is now asking every day. What can I actually do? And there's so much that you can do, and I beg you to do it. Let's make all our money matter in the serious business of living in an excellent world by 2020. So now it's my pleasure to hand over to Nest to outline what they're doing to use pension money to build a better world. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks, Richard. So for people who don't know, Nest is a UK defined contribution pension scheme set up for auto-enrolment by government for any employer to use to meet their pension duties that came into effect in 2012. Over that time, Nest has grown to become the biggest scheme in the country by membership. We currently have around 10 million members saving with us and 13 billion of pounds of assets under management, and we're set to be at 100 billion in the next decade or so. Also, by the late 2020s, it is expected that 1/3 of the UK workforce will have an account with Nest. So at Nest, we offer a high quality, sophisticated investment strategy, which responsible investment is at the heart of. Our core mission is to improve the retirement of millions of people who invest with us. We are committed to investing responsibly because we want the companies and industries we invest in to be sustainable and make money for our members long into the future. A big part of this involves thinking about things such as how companies and markets that support them operate and how they treat people and affect the environment. But if we are to truly improve the retirements of our members, we cannot ignore the world that they will retire into. And this is particularly important because millions of our members are young. They will be saving with Nest for decades. There's no point in working to build up a decent nest egg for our members throughout their working lives just to find that they'll retire into a world ravaged by climate change. So our commitment to responsible investment runs through the heart of our default fund strategy, where 99% of our members are invested, and that's where the real impact is. Earlier this year, we teamed up with the Make My Money Matter campaign, which calls on UK pension funds to put people and the planet alongside profit when investing pensions. It also wants funds to give transparency to savers for them to understand how and where their money is being invested. At Nest, we very much share this ethos. We want our members to understand the power that their pension is having and how we can bring about change on the issues that they care about. This is why we are working hard to communicate with our members on what we're doing with their money to tackle important issues like climate change, for example. And from the member research that we conducted over the years, it shows that our members want us to do this. We have found that actually 73% of our members want us to consider in our investment decision making how companies and markets that we invested are run and affect people and the planet. Half said that the activities that we undertake on responsible investment improves their impression of Nest. So this is a really important validation from us that our members want us to be investing responsibly on their behalf. These findings have helped also inform our belief that responsible investment is an effective hook to get people engaged and potentially even excited about pensions, something that they've traditionally never really engaged with in the past. I'll just talk a little bit about how Nest is delivering profit with purpose and how we've tackled things such as climate change to help us do that. At Nest, we believe that delivering a more purposeful future goes hand in hand with delivering the best possible financial outcomes for members at retirement. Tackling climate change, for example, and preparing for the transition to the low carbon economy helps us tackle the biggest risk for members, but at the same time, delivering values that our members really care about. A new climate change policy, for example, aims to align Nest's portfolios with the goals of the Paris Agreement that aims to keep global temperatures to below 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels by 2050. And this allows us to put in place an ambition to be net zero across our investments by 2050 or earlier, with the expectation that we will cut carbon emissions in half by 2030. And to help us deliver on that ambition, we've set out a number of commitments that we hope to make good progress on in the next few years. To start with, we've moved nearly all of our equity allocation into a climate-aware strategy. This has immediately allowed us to reduce Nest's carbon footprint and invest more in companies involved in green technology, renewable energy, and companies that are better prepared for the transition to a low-carbon economy. We've also started divesting from companies involved in the most riskiest business activities and fossil fuels, and that involves thermal coal, oil sands, and Arctic drilling. And we aim to be completely divested from these assets by 2025 at the latest, unless companies have committed full phase out by 2030. We've also been active in pressuring companies to make progress to committing to a low carbon economy and deliver strategies that allow them to be better prepared for that low carbon future. So we've been voting and engaging with companies, encouraging them to deliver strategies and future-proof their business models so that they will continue to deliver the best returns for our members going forward. And a big part of delivering upon this strategy will be to engage with our fund managers and, commit to them some targets and objectives that will allow them to make progress in evolving our portfolios in line with our climate ambitions. Our decision to go tobacco-free across our whole portfolio, for example, was based on financial considerations. Obviously, we've been mindful about the harmful nature of tobacco and the impact that it's had on people's health and societies. And we've also been aware of the ESG risks that investing in the tobacco sector has carried. But ultimately, companies that persistently have negative impacts on people and the environment are unlikely to be sustainable and profitable in the long term, which is why we decided to divest from tobacco last year, and we've delivered on our aim to be tobacco-free 1 year ahead of schedule. We're also committed, as mentioned earlier, to engaging with companies to drive positive behavioural change in the interests of their workers, the environment, wider society, and ultimately our pension savers. With regards to working with other asset owners and others in the investment industry to driving positive behavioural change, it's important that we do come together and collectively work together. We have the ability to combine our power and influence to drive change across industries and markets globally, to hold company executives to account where they're not doing the right thing. Nest is part of a number of collaborative initiatives like the Climate Action 100, the IIGCC, and the Principles for Responsible Investment that allows us to collaborate with other like-minded investors and create power and influence and help create structural change in markets where it's needed. We're also working closely with our fund managers to ensure that they too use their capital and influence to make a difference. And it's not just because they're nice people. Doing so will help achieve sustainable and superior returns for their clients and ultimately our members. And the member research that we've undertaken and several others have undertaken in the industry is becoming clearer. It shows that savers increasingly expect their pensions to be invested responsibly, and that when we do invest, that we are thinking about the impacts that these investments have on people around the world and on the environment. So we've got a very strong motivation from our members to be doing this, not because it's the right thing to do, but ultimately it can help deliver them the best retirement outcomes. At Nest, we're long-term holders of companies globally. We have a preference to support and engage with companies rather than divesting from them. From a climate change perspective, we view that big energy companies have a vital role to play if we are to successfully transition from a carbon-based economy to a green and renewable energy economy. Many of the world's biggest investors are coming together to engage with these companies and ask them to invest more in renewable energy, deliver strategies to help them transition to a low carbon economy, and ensure that their board structures are composed and structured in the right way to prepare them to better tackle climate change. We therefore want to remain shareholders so that we can challenge them, particularly the laggards that aren't making enough change. Our Climate Aware Fund allows us to understand and identify the biggest laggards on climate change and engage with them over a 3-year timeframe. Where we deem that progress hasn't been enough, or companies aren't delivering in line with our expectations, we will think long and hard about divesting from these companies. We won't wait for these companies to change forever, and divestment is a key plank of our climate change policy that could come into effect in the next 2 to 3 years. But we view stewardship as a really important tool in our box. Just this past voting season, we were involved with engaging with Barclays and Total, asking them to commit to be net zero companies. We were involved in a shareholder resolution and engaged with these companies ahead of those shareholder resolutions, and we were pleased that they made a number of important changes to their ambitions and strategies. So without this engagement and dialogue with shareholders, companies won't understand what needs to be done. So it's important that we team up with them and partner with them, because in this way we're likely to get the best solutions for a low carbon economy and the best returns for our members. So in conclusion, Nest is committed to investing responsibly because we believe this can help enhance and protect our members' returns long into the future. But it can also help solve those global scale challenges that our members care so deeply about, and will help them retire into a world that's fit and decent and retirement and for them to retire in. And a lot of our activity, the vast majority of it is carried out in our default fund, where 99% of our members are invested. And we're working hard to create the real impact where a lot of this capital comes together in that default fund. So thanks again for inviting me to speak today, and look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks.
Thank you very much indeed to Ethical Finance for the very kind invitation to speak here today. Thank you all to you as well for your time. I think what UNDP and the Scottish Government are doing with this event is incredibly important in the run-up to COP26. To my mind, there's arguably never been a more important conference that the UK will have hosted. And I say that very carefully, knowing full well that we also are hosting the G7 next year in the UK. And there's clearly a huge amount for us to be dealing with in the geopolitical environment right now. But still nothing more important than climate and climate change, despite the scale of some of the other challenges, which is why I think the Make My Money Matter campaign is so important. I think the idea that people need to be reconnected to their money is correct. If you recall how the London Stock Exchange was created in 1802, real people would walk into it with cash in their pocket and walk out with share certificates, knowing what they owned. Since the disintermediation over the last 200 years has taken place, people now no longer tend to know even how a pension works, let alone where it's invested or how they can make their money matter with their vote and their voice at company AGMs. And I do encourage people to vote with their vote before they vote with their feet. But if the company doesn't respond, of course, there is the ultimate sanction of walking away. But being a patient, engaged, active owner, using capital to power a transition towards a net zero economy, for me, has to be the solution to the Paris Agreement. And actually, it is the only thing that gives me the hope that we will do that. I'm also incredibly pleased that we've got now so many central bank governors through the Network for Greening the Financial System focused on this too, as well as the finance ministers within the Finance Ministers Network for Climate Change. And I've worked in the area for 24 years, seeing so many finance ministers and central bank governors now doing this in the last 2 years is more change than I've seen in the preceding 22. We're very proud as Aviva. I work for Aviva Investors, but the parent company has announced very recently that all of Aviva's own auto-enrollment default pension funds will be net zero by 2050. It clearly won't just be that that's not enough for us, but it is 2 million clients across the UK whose pension will be net zero by 2050. Very proud to have made that announcement. As I say, it's a small contribution towards this mega challenge. The mega challenge is, if you look at business as usual, the London Stock Exchange is heading towards 3.8 degrees. That's the current global warming embedded potential within the exchange. At 3 degrees, the lungs of the planet, the rainforests start to collapse. At 1.5 degrees, we've lost 90% of the world's coral reefs, at the same time as causing a challenge for half of the world's population in terms of giving them a temperature that they can no longer function at. The human body will cease to function in certain temperatures, and they will have 20 days of that at least. As I say, half the planet at 1.5 degrees. So 4 degrees looks like an existential challenge to the insurance sector, which is why the business I work for, Aviva, has been so concerned about climate risk for so long. I think 1994 was the first time the board of Aviva discussed climate risk. So this isn't something we've been worried about just now. Now, the biggest opportunity, I think, it's not just the $3 trillion of assets under management in the UK pensions market. It's actually the approaching $370 trillion that's in the global capital market. And we know we need an enormous amount of capital to deliver the Paris Agreement. There are various estimates, but it's pretty shocking, in fact, that they're all estimates. We need to know exactly how much money is required. We need to know where it's coming from, how it's going to be securitized, and how we're going to mobilize it at the pace and scale required to deliver the Paris Agreement. So we're humbly suggesting, based on all sorts of ideas from all sorts of places, that we need a vision for a Marshall Plan for the planet. And the way to build that is to encourage every member state that produces a nationally determined contribution to set out what that NDC requires in terms of capital, so a capital raising plan, what infrastructure they need to build, which of those bits of infrastructure are investable. In other words, they can be securitized because they generate cash flows. And then as a result, where are those securities going to be, if you like, listed, or how are they going to be brought to the market? And which fund managers are going to buy them. So that's what we need from the public sector: investment grade policy and a plan for mobilizing money. In return, I think the public sector should expect the private sector, particularly finance, to set out an institutionally determined contribution, an IDC to mirror the NDC. And our IDCs as finance should say, this is how we intend to mobilize our money to deliver the Paris Agreement. This is how we'll use our voice and our vote, as well as the capital, to power the transition. And we then, having set out the institutionally determined contribution, which should be based on a TCFD report, but bear in mind, whilst I'm on the task force, it doesn't go far enough. It's not aligned with the Paris Agreement, and it doesn't require science-based targets, and it doesn't require a net zero pledge, which is, I think, the few missing bits of a TCFD report to make it Paris aligned. So once we have the institutionally determined contributions based, as I say, on the TCFD report, setting out the plan, we then need annual reporting, a triennial stock take, and a 5-year review of ambition by every finance institution, particularly the systemically important ones, so that just as Christiana Figueres and Lauren Fabius, who produced the Paris Agreement so amazingly, their genius was to grow it from the bottom up and encourage everyone to do what they could within a top-down vision of 1.5 degrees. We now need to do the same thing with finance, and we need to use COP26 to achieve that. We, in other words, need to work together to build an international platform for climate finance. If any of you wish to work with us toward that end, please get in touch via LinkedIn or Twitter. Thank you very much indeed.